At some point in life, you'll have at least one encounter with grief. Whether it is the death of someone you cared about, a job or career loss, or a terminal diagnosis. And when this happens, the 5 stages of grieving serve as a framework for understanding. Well, it's kind of like a guide on how to grieve. This concept was introduced by a psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her book On Death and Dying, which is basically a book that talks about the 5 stages of grief, and it also examines the attitudes of the dying and the factors that contribute to society's anxiety over death. But anyway, I would like to go over them and see what these stages are talking about. But before that, it's important to mention that the stages of grief don't usually happen in the same order, nor does everyone go through all of these stages. And now that that's said, first there is the stage of denial. And during this stage, simply denying a certain loss that someone has can serve more as a defense mechanism. And this defense mechanism is kind of more like a cope to hold on to the immediate shock of loss. You might say things like, there is no way this is happening, or this has to be just a dream, right? But regardless of that, this stage tends to happen because denial helps us to pace our feelings of grief. And as you accept the reality of the loss and start to ask questions, you are unknowingly beginning the healing process, and the denial is beginning to fade. Next we have anger, because as the initial shock can wear off, it's common for people to become angry. And when being in this stage, someone might point their anger towards themselves, the thing or person that they have lost, maybe even their loved ones, or maybe even God. They might start to say things like, how could this have happened? Why did this happen? And who is to blame? And in Elizabeth's other book, I like to say her first name instead of her last, no disrespect. In her book, Questions and Answers on Death and Dying, she empathizes the need for people to do their best to let those who are in the stage of anger feel their feelings. And try not to take the anger personally, because underneath all the anger hides the pain. Up next, there is a stage of bargaining, where people may try to negotiate or make deals in an attempt to reverse or lessen the loss. How? Well, they might bargain with themselves, saying things like, if only I have done something differently. Or they might go to a higher power with the request, I promise to be a better person if X happens. Or I will never do this again if Y happens. Regardless, it's a way of trying to regain control or prevent the loss from occurring. And it's also common to find ourselves going over and over something that happened in the past and asking a lot of what if questions. Because what if indeed I did not go outside when it was raining? Moving on, there is depression. Now, just to clarify, depression in grief is not a sign of mental illness, but a natural response to the loss. It involves deep sadness, regret, fear, and uncertainty about the future. This stage is marked by a sense of emptiness or despair as the person begins to understand the extent of the loss. And all jokes aside, because I'm trying to be funny right now, but please don't take this lightly. This pain can be very intense and can have lasting effects for over months, maybe even years. But then, lastly, there is acceptance. And in this last stage, you begin to come to terms with the reality of the loss. Now, acceptance is often confused with being alright or okay with what happens, but this is not really true. This stage is about accepting the fact that what happened, happened, and recognizing that this new reality is real. Or, in other words, it is what it is. And who knows? You may find ways to move forward and adjust to life without the person or situation that you have lost. Maybe you might even find ways to connect or hold on to memories of what you have lost. Or maybe you learn from it and potentially grow from the experience. But nonetheless, despite of whatever happens, we cannot do so until we have given ourselves time to grieve. And so, in a conclusion, some key points to remember is that grieving is a unique and personal experience. Not everyone goes through these stages in the same way or order. Some people may revisit certain stages multiple times, maybe even adding more stages to the grieving process. And in the end, to sum it all up, with these stages, the hope would be that people gain more knowledge of, how to grieve in a healthy way, so that you can be better equipped to cope with loss and life. And with that I say, thank you for watching. Take care.